Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller.
Who doesn't know Noa Tishby? She's the most heard voice in the world in defense of Israel and the Jewish people. She was a star actress in Israel and a successful producer in Hollywood before she full-blown took on this mission. She was Israel's first special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and delegitimization, and she testified in US Congress about anti-Semitism after October 7. She now launched her second New York Times best-selling book titled Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, that she co-authored with Black best-selling author Emmanuel Acho, in which they discuss and sometimes debate today's anti-Zionism as a dangerous form of anti-Semitism and racism. Dear listeners, we're honored and thrilled to bring to you on our show today the world's biggest spokesperson for our cause, Noa Tishby. Noa, thank you for everything you do for all of us, and welcome on our show.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything that you do. I know you've been at this for many, many, many years. You've tried to warn us that this is coming, and a lot of people didn't listen. So here we are today.
Here we are. That's right. So, Noa, your new book, Uncomfortable Conversations with the Jew, is very successful. I read it and I learned so much about how anti-Semitism works and how to explain it to somebody. What was your main goal with the book, and why did you write it together with a Black non-Jewish author?
Yeah. So first of all, the book it was not my idea. It was entirely Emmanuel Acho's idea. He wrote a book called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man around the George Floyd massacre, and did very well. And he decided to do the same thing for the Jewish community. And he reached out to me a year and a half before October 7th. So way before October 7th happened, when the majority of people from outside of the Jewish community did not even notice the rise in anti-Semitism. We did. Jews did. Emmanuel looked around and he saw this rise in anti-Semitism that's coming specifically from Black men. And he was very disturbed by that. And he said, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm a Black man. I need to ask these questions. And he reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to write this book with him, which of course I couldn't have said yes faster. And I'm just thrilled that we were able to have these conversations. And it's the book answers the question to the people that don't know, but also allows our community to realize and to find out and to investigate and to learn how to answer these questions. I get that a lot in my travels and my events. And when I talk to people, they say, I don't know how to answer when somebody asks me X, Y, and Z. Here it is. This is the book that has all the questions and all the answers, both outside of our community and within our community.
And what has been the reaction to the book, and even maybe the negative reactions to the book?
Well, the negative reactions mostly targeting Emmanuel. He has been getting a lot of heat for even just being associated with me. He had an anti-Semitic attack / slur thrown at him in Hollywood at a restaurant when he was sitting, and he tells the story. He was sitting in a restaurant and he walked out, and as he walking out, this girl kind of like mumbles something at him, and he turns to her and she goes, I hope they pay you well. Yeah. And he goes, who's they? And she's like, you know who they are. He's like, who is they? He goes, the Zionists. So he was obviously freaked out by this. And he sat in the car and he's like, is this girl crazy? Is she going to come try to stab me? And then it dawned on him that if this is how he feels as a strong former football star, Black man, tall and muscular, what is the Jewish community feeling? So he is the one that gets the most amount of heat. Obviously, if you've been following me in the past few years, you know where I stand on all of this. Right. He has been getting a lot of heat from his community, from outside of his community. So he's been extraordinarily brave to take this heat and stand in the line of fire and take it and not
Buckle.
move. Yeah, not buckle.
Right. So public opinion in the West and in the whole world is turning so much against Israel, and actually that already started after the 6 Day War, but it's intensifying ever since, up to a level where Israel is demonized, and even its existence is questions.
Yes.
Its right to exist is questioned these days.
Yeah.
What causes this intensifying criticism, and what risks does it have for the future?
Well, the risk, we've seen them on October 7th. There's no question that the people that are against Israel's right to exist, as you said, they're interested in taking down the Jewish state, and by all means necessary. They told us that. They are not trying to hide that. This has been going on for a very long time. What has been happening is that there has been a concerted campaign that was well-funded and well-coordinated decades before October 7th to delegitimize Israel's standing in the world, to turn Israel toxic. Israel's enemies have concluded rightfully that they're not going to be able to take the country down militarily, and they have shifted their strategy to try and take Israel down geopolitically. And they have been doing this, poisoning the well about Israel for literally decades, through media, through academia, we see it now. These are the results. Everything that we're seeing right now on college campuses is the result of 30 years of concerted effort that's been happening on college campuses and other kind of liberal bastions of our society for decades. So this is not unique. It's not by accident. It's by design, and we're seeing the results of it right now. This is obviously leaning on deep-rooted subconscious and conscious anti-Semitism. So when you describe the Israeli army, or Israel in and of itself, or Zionists, right, even better, as bloodthirsty demons, it's the same as in the 1500s in Europe, the Jews were described as bloodthirsty demons. It's exactly the same way. It just that the language today shifted from blaming the Jew for everything that's wrong in the world to blaming the Jewish state for everything that's wrong in the world. And it's one of those things that for the majority of Americans was very difficult to see. But I moved here as a liberal Israeli, and I was a young liberal actress, writer, producer, model, singer. And I'm thinking of myself as this kind of like citizen of the world. I'm just like everybody else. And then I moved to America and to LA, and I see people's obsession with Israel, and it felt off. And I knew I can be very critical of Israeli governments throughout the years. It's a part of being in a healthy democracy. But I was looking at people going, this is not criticism of Israeli government policies. This is an obsession. And it was very easy for me from the outside to see that there's something else at play. And that thing that is at play is the subconscious biases that people carry around about the Jewish people. And when you have these subconscious biases about the Jewish people, you're going to be affected. Your opinion about Israel is going to be affected by them, whether you understand it or acknowledge it or not.
So are you saying it's okay to criticize Israel, but where do you draw the line?
Israel's right to exist. There's nothing wrong with criticizing Israeli government policies or politicians or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. I have done this myself. I was fired with my position as a special envoy for combating anti-Semitism because I was against the proposed laws of the judicial overhaul. So I criticized the proposed laws. I didn't criticize the government. I didn't try to I didn't even talk about specific politicians, and I certainly did not criticize the existence of the state of Israel. The line is very easy to see. It's whether you acknowledge that Israel has the right to exist or not. If you can say that you hate Bibi or Lapid or Gantz or this, you hate Israel's policies in the West Bank, in Gaza, you hate the war, you hate whatever, but you don't want Israel to cease to exist. And that is what those college campus encampments are talking about. They are not talking about Occupation 67. They're talking about Occupation 48. The entire Jewish existence in the Middle East is unacceptable to them. And that is unacceptable to us.
So, what are we going to do about it? The hearts and minds of these young people are forgetting social media, which is already major, but they're teachers and every day I read new policies of what's allowed in classrooms, and I'm just sick to my stomach. How can we turn it around? What can we do?
Well, first of all, is acknowledging what it is that we're dealing with. That this is a sea change as far as I'm concerned, because I've only been talking about this in the past 15 years. And it feels like, and I know you too, Evelyn, like, and we all have been saying this for a long time. So at least now the majority of Americans, non-Jews and Jews alike, understand that this is an actual problem that needs to be taken care of. The majority of Americans are not okay with this. The majority of them, we're looking at a small number of people that are actually on these encampments. Like, we're talking about hundreds of people, not talking about thousands of people. This is not turning into the kind of like movement that they thought this was going to turn into. And that is something very positive. So first and foremost, acknowledge what it is that we are dealing with, and then fight against it. Fight against it. Every single one of your listeners right now can fight against this in their city hall. Keep an eye on BDS referendums that are coming up in your kids' college campuses and in your friends' neighborhoods, and fight against every single one of them. Look, it's a drop in the sea. It's a huge undertaking that we're dealing with here, but it's okay. We know how to do this. We've done this before. It's just, this is a new iteration of old hate. We just have to fight it in the way that we've been fighting it for thousands of years.
And so if we look at our Jewish organizations, let's take Jewish organizations in America. What would you advise our Jewish organizations to do about this anti-Zionism and, the efforts to delegitimize the existence of Israel?
I think that Jewish organizations for a very long time were complacent to some extent. I think that I started my activism on social media. So I started the first online advocacy and rapid response organization in 2011. So I've been at this for a long time, understanding that this is a new frontier. I think that a lot of people are understanding this right now. We have a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of resources and a lot of people that are willing to help and be part of it. I think it needs to be distributed differently. More into hearts and minds, because that's where our enemies have been putting a lot of money, time, and effort into in the past.
So how would you do that?
Yeah.
We need to transform Jewish education to begin with. I think that we have failed our kids to some extent because we haven't dealt with the thorny issues. I think somebody like Seth Rogen is a great example, because Seth Rogen was complaining about being lied to in Jewish education, and that he didn't know that there were people there when the Jews returned. And I was blown away when I heard that, because I wasn't lied to. I mean, I was told the truth, that like the existence and the safety and security of the state of Israel doesn't require that we lie for it. So and that's why in my first book, there's a chapter about Arab Israelis and Arabs in general in the region. There's a chapter about the settlements. And I am very much, I'm all for bringing up the difficult issues and uncomfortable conversations, if you will, before anybody else does. And it was very important to do that. It's very important for me to do this. And I think that we need to, in Jewish education, for example, deal with the question of apartheid, ethnic cleansing, genocide, all these things that we have brushed them off as fake news, because they are. And we thought, as educators, we're like, we're not going to bring this up. We're not going to talk about ethnic cleansing. It's a lie. Obviously, it's a lie. But we have to be the one to bring it up to our children before they hear about this for the first time on college campus. Because if they hear about these things for the first time, not from us, they think that we have lied to them on the entire everything. There has to be a push on legislation on social media. This needs to come from Congress. This needs to come.
Yes, sir.
What's that? No, you're asking like what to do. So there has to be that push. We need to so stuff like that. There has to be more push on content, on Jewish and Israeli content. I mean, there aren't a lot of these stories that are being told in our entertainment industry, and it's kind of ironic because we have invented that industry, and the Jews created this industry but left themselves out. So this needs to change. There's a lot of changes that need to be done.
And the education, more education about what really happened in Israel and happens in Israel is for only Jewish
Not
kids?
but that's, I think that the adjustment there needs to be for Jewish kids. Listen, on the other side, in public schools, they do ethnic studies curriculum that are decentering the West, that are teaching everybody that colonialism is the worst thing in the world, which is obviously not great, but also Israel's not a colonialist state, and they're bunching Israel with it. And now people are looking at Israel as if it's the last bastion of colonialism, white colonialism, that needs to be taken down. So, you know, there has to be Jewish education that that doesn't teach Israel studies and Israel education as this utopian, perfect, magical, unicorn loving, you know, filled place, because it isn't. It's a country. And outside of the Jewish community, the ethnic studies curriculum will have to be looked at. DEI will have to be looked at. All these kind of frameworks that have been prevalent in our society that have been working against us.
And I think we have to realize that there is a coordinated, deliberate effort to delegitimize Israel.
Of course,
it's not something that happens spontaneously,
not by
and we have
no.
to stop maybe to react spontaneously, right?
Not by accident, by design. This has been in the works for decades, and I'm sure they've been successful more than their wildest dreams.
Yes,
And
I would just want to say I wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times today, because yesterday the New York Times had an article about humanitarian aid that left out some very important things that was anti-Israel. On the same day, the Wall Street Journal had an article that refuted. So they'll probably won't, post my letter, but we all have to try. And that's
we
one
do
of the
have
things.
to try, and also understand that the Israel and the Jewish community, we are patient zero in a post-truth world. So this is not the fact that you can read not just the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, not just like have different feeds on your social media, but have different comments on the posts that you look at on social media is such a clear indication that we are living in a fragmented world. The Jews we're just a part of this. It's a way wider problem. And yes, each and every one of us need to do their part.
right, we totally agree with that. So reading your book, Noah, it moved me so much when you laid out for Emmanuel, your co-author, how vulnerable you feel as an Israeli and as a Jew after October 7.
Yeah.
And during this global outburst of anti-Semitism. I recognize this feeling, and I think all Jews recognize it.
Yeah.
I tend to fall a little bit silent when I'm confronted with very unjust and aggressive criticism of Israel. But you, while you feel so vulnerable, you manage to speak up so strongly.
I definitely don't fall silent. That's for sure.
No. So how do you manage to draw the line and sound like you cannot be pushed over?
I just am a strong believer that you can't get canceled if you don't shut up. So I just don't shut up. I think that denying the Jewish people the right for self-governance, no matter how flawed you think it might be, is an anti-Semitic hate crime. And I am an Israeli American, so I know both cultures very well. I listen to news in Israel every single day. I know exactly what's happening there, to the best of my ability, right? And every citizen's ability. American and or Israeli. And I am just not willing to sit quiet. It's just that. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm my mother's daughter. If you knew her, you'd be like, oh yeah, I get it. I'm like the soft version of her. She's a feisty one.
Okay. Does being an Israeli and having served in the IDF maybe also make you strong? As opposed to maybe diaspora Jews?
Yes, because I think that diaspora Jews all over the world, we became complacent. we became very comfortable being on the inside, and the majority of American Jews, specifically of a certain generation, thought we're fully assimilated and none of it is happening. It's not, you know what I mean? Like everybody were like, I'm going to name my kids Tiffany with an I and Ashley with a GH, and I'm going to forget about being Jewish. And I'm just going to tell them, don't worry about being Jewish. It's fine. And that's not true. And as an Israeli, I don't know if I would put it on my military service because, you know, I was in a military singing troupe. So it's not like I was such a fighter. But definitely living in Israel and feeling this constant pressure and having this kind of like listen, I'm 4th-generation Middle Eastern. I'm like, my attitude, my energy is much more Middle Eastern than polite American in that sense. Like I had to tone myself down when I moved here because I was so aggressive. People were like, oh my God. So maybe that's a part of it. But I gotta tell you, I am recognizing right now this attitude, this energy of this kind of like Israeli FU, with a lot of my American Jewish friends and new friends and a lot of people in Hollywood. They are becoming bare Jews one after the other. They're like, nope, not going to be a pushover anymore. So maybe this Israeli attitude is actually seeping through into the diaspora, because we've had pogroms for thousands of years. This is the most videographed pogrom in our history, but it's also the only one where the IDF was there to save us. That never happened before.
And a funny aside, I've started watching the movie Exodus again, which is from 1961, just because I think we all need to be reminded of how hard Israel's independence was fought for, even though Jews have been in the land of Israel, I always try and say this, for thousands and thousands of years, which is one of the things,
uninterrupted Jewish presence in the land.
Exactly, that we Americans and everyone else in the diaspora has to remind people we didn't just arrive in 1948.
Yes.
So we can't thank you enough for coming on this show. We really hope that our listeners are encouraged. Is there one thing that if you could wave a magic wand, you'd like to say to our listeners, this is what you can do besides writing letters to the New York Times? It's a joke.
Yeah, I can't say that. You know what to do. Everybody knows what they can do and what they are capable of doing, if at all. And if it's even as it doesn't have to be big. I think one of the most powerful things is open up the community, invite your non-Jewish friends for Shabbat. Start there. Change the hearts one after the other.
Right.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you so much for coming on our
Greg.
show. Thank you for our listeners.
We recommend everybody to buy your new book.
And the first one, was amazing. I sent a copy to a Jewish fraternity at Berkeley because they didn't know enough, and I wanted them to put it in whatever you call the common room, and they should all read it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you.
And
and it's your new book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew.
Yes.
And your first book is
Israel, a simple guide to the most misunderstood country on earth.
Yes. And those of you who want to know more about Evelyn and myself, you can go to Never Again Is Now podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And please, as we end every episode, we say, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.
Yes.